I didn't say a word when the HOA president shoved a stack of violation slips across the table and jabbed her finger at the one labeled unauthorized roadside parking. She dressed up for the occasion, pearl necklace, blazer, the whole performance. The others watched her like school children, hoping she'd pass out gold stars. I just slid one thin folder across to their attorney instead, county maps, a title abstract, and the survey stamped in red from the state office. My name marked in bold across the parcel, private pull-off, non-subdivision. The lawyer's lips tightened, and the color drained from his face. He cleared his throat and muttered, "This isn't under HOA jurisdiction. You could have heard a pin drop." I just folded my hands and let the silence stretch until the president finally pushed back in her chair, eyes darting like she was calculating just how badly she'd overplayed her hand. It hadn't started this way. When I first came up the mountain, all I wanted was a place to breathe. The cabin had been in my family since the 70s, nothing fancy. Just cedar planks weathered silver with age, a tin roof that rattled in the rain, and a little stone chimney my grandfather stacked himself. It sat tucked off a bend in the road, shielded by pines, with a clear view of the ridgeline if you climbed up the back hill. That place had always been my reset button. After years working long hours in town, I thought maybe it was time to slow down, mend up some beams, sand the porch, and actually enjoy mornings again. The pull-off in front was the only level spot for miles where you could park off the road without blocking traffic. My family used it for decades. Trucks, trailers, firewood deliveries. Nobody cared. It was just the way things were on that mountain. The trouble rolled in with the new HOA. A developer had carved out a handful of modern chalets further down the ridge, pitched them as mountain luxury, and roped buyers into an association to preserve character. They extended their little bubble of control like ivy, claiming jurisdiction over everything they could reach. I thought they were a joke, honestly, until the first bright orange ticket appeared under my windshield wiper. HOA violation, unauthorized parking. I remember just standing there on the gravel, holding the slip in my hand, trying to process what I was looking at. My cabin wasn't even in their subdivision. I hadn't signed their covenant, hadn't agreed to their rules, yet they acted like I was some teenager parking illegally at the mall. For a second, I wondered if it was just a prank. It wasn't. Within weeks, more notices followed. They taped one to my cabin door, claiming I was obstructing community access. Another accused me of creating a safety hazard by leaving my truck parked overnight in a pull-off. Never mind that emergency vehicles had used that very space for decades. When icy switchbacks made the mountain road impassable, I tried calling the number listed on the violations, expecting some reasonable conversation. Maybe even a mistake they'd quickly retract. Instead, I got a curt voice on the other end. All properties within the Ridge Road community are subject to enforcement. When I explained my cabin predated their association and wasn't in their filings, she laughed and said, "That's what everyone says." I wasn't angry yet, more bewildered than anything. I wrote emails, attached my deed, even highlighted the survey lines in yellow, thinking maybe someone just hadn't looked carefully. The responses, when they came at all, were dismissive. "Your concerns are noted. The board has reviewed and stands by the violation." One even warned that continued noncompliance could lead to towing or liens. That's when the shift happened inside me. I realized they weren't interested in clarity. They thrived on intimidation. Every ignored email, every smug letter slid under my door chipped away at the idea that this was just a mistake. It wasn't. They were testing how far they could push someone who didn't sign their papers, and that's when I stopped trying to reason. That's when I started digging. I spent nights with maps spread across my dining table, pulling records from the county clerk's office, the original road easement from 1968, the subdivision plat from the developer in 2004, even the State Forestry Commission's notes about fire breaks along the ridge. I learned something very quickly. That pull-off wasn't just convenient. It was legally carved out decades before the HOA even existed. It was listed in the old right-of-way documents as private turnout, maintained at owner's discretion. And the owner, my grandfather's estate, which passed to me. I had more than a deed. I had state-certified maps, survey boundaries, and county maintenance logs all backing me up. Meanwhile, things got colder with the neighbors. Some stopped waving when I drove by. Others, clearly under the HOA's thumb, started whispering if I so much as stacked wood out front. My sister stopped bringing her kids to the cabin because she didn't want trouble. I won't lie, it wore me down. Nights stretched long. The only light in my living room, the glow of legal documents and a mug of black coffee. But I kept documenting everything, every notice, every voicemail, photos of every ticket they slapped on my windshield. If they wanted a paper war, I was building an arsenal. So when the next summons came, mandatory appearance at HOA board for continued violations, I didn't fight it. I showed up early, folder in hand. They expected me flustered, maybe begging. Instead, I sat quietly while they stacked their little violations like poker chips. The president gave her speech about protecting the character of the community and equal enforcement. Then she shoved the last ticket forward, the one about unauthorized roadside parking. That was my moment. I slid my folder across to their attorney without a word. Watching his face pale as he read the survey was one of the most satisfying things I've ever witnessed. He cleared his throat, shifted in his seat, and finally said the words I've been waiting for. This property is not, in fact, subject to the HOA. The silence after that stretched like a canyon. The president sputtered, tried to recover, but the board members were already avoiding eye contact. They knew the game was up. The fallout came quick. Within weeks, the HOA quietly rescinded all fines. They sent a letter, not an apology, but a clarification that my property fell outside current enforcement boundaries. Neighbors started acting different, too. Some pretended nothing had happened, waving again like old times. Others couldn't look me in the eye. The president eventually resigned, citing health reasons. I heard whispers that some homeowners were furious about the legal fees spent chasing me, that a few even pushed to dissolve the HOA entirely. I didn't need the gossip. All I needed was the quiet, and I got it back. Now, when I drive up that mountain road, I still park in my pull-off. Sometimes I leave my truck there overnight, just because I can. No tickets, no notices, no threats. Just the sound of wind through the pines and the crackle of a fire waiting. Inside, they don't bother me anymore. Some wave. Some turn their heads. Either way, the message landed. Not every fight needs shouting. Sometimes, the quiet weight of a deed on the table does all the talking you'll ever need.